hybrid in the Council chamber and remotely via Microsoft Teams. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing the meeting from the remote locations or here in the chamber. Please could everybody ensure that the mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, you should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window. I will come to you in the order that I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you've finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I'll also ask officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite you to speak during the course of the meeting. You too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. We'll now proceed to agenda business. And the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence from members. The Deputy Leader is not here. She's on other council business, but she will be joining us later in the meeting as soon as that other business has concluded. Also had apologies from the Chief Finance Officer, who was on leave, and all other members of the Corporate Management Board and Cabinet are present at the meeting. I'll now receive any declarations of personal or prejudicial interest from members and officers in accordance with the provision of the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by this authority in September 2008. Are there any declarations, please? No, I cannot see any, but if you do identify a declaration during the course of the meeting, please indicate, and I will take it at that point in the meeting. We will now receive for approval the minutes of the last meeting of Cabinet, which took place on the 15th of November. Can I have a mover that is a true and accurate record of that meeting, please?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. All in agreement?
Yep.
Thank you, colleagues. As the Deputy Leader, the Cabinet Member for Social Services is joining the meeting later on, I will defer consideration of the first report on the agenda on updated fostering allowances policy. And instead, the first report we will receive will be from the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support on the appointment of local authority governors. Lindsay, please.
Good afternoon indeed. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support. The purpose of this report, Leader, is to seek approval from Cabinet for the appointment of the local authority governor to the school governing body listed at paragraph 4.1. In accordance with Council guidance, officers have considered applications received for the current vacancy for the local authority governor position on the governing body of Ysgol Gymraeg Bro Ogw. There was competition for the vacancy and the applicants are detailed at paragraph 4. The officer panel scrutinised the applications and noted that neither applicant is currently an elected ward member or an elected councillor. Also that neither applicant has previous experience as a school governor. However, both applicants demonstrate significant experience in the education sector within Wales. Having given due regard to the strengths presented in the application of both applicants, officers determined that the recommended appointment is Mr. Ben Morgan. Therefore, Leader, I take it the recommendation of paragraph 9.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader and Chair. Just to say thank you very much for both these members of the public putting their names forward to be governors. Unfortunately, there was only one place, but just to say there are still plenty of vacancies out there for members who are listening and members of the public who might be watching us. There are still plenty of vacancies which can be seen further on in the report. Please do get those applications in because governors are very important. Thank you. And I should say, I will also remove the report.
Thank you for moving the recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please?
Second that, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Spanzik. Are we all in agreement with that, please, colleagues? Thank you. And of course, you make a very important point there, Councillor Blundell. I'm sure the other applicant will be disappointed, but there are lots of opportunities, and we'd encourage anyone to get in touch with us and explore those opportunities across the county borough. So the next report we received from the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support is on the proposals for a Puthcall Welsh Medium Seedling School and new childcare facility. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to detail the outcome of the options appraisal process for the delivery of the Welsh Medium Seedling School and childcare provision for the Puthcall area, and to seek approval to consult on a proposal to establish a Welsh Medium Seedling School and childcare provision for the Puthcall area on the land at Puthcall Primary School site. In March 2018, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance made available £30 million across Wales for projects dedicated to supporting and growing the use of the Welsh language in education. This funding would assist the delivery of Welsh Government's ongoing commitment to achieve 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. A childcare sufficiency audit of settings within Bridgend has identified gaps within this vital provision, and these gaps, together with a lack of Welsh medium childcare, result in a decision being made to centre Bridgend's proposals on Welsh medium sessional childcare and wraparound care. In determining the locations that would benefit from such provision, consideration was given to developing centres to support transition from Welsh medium childcare provision to Welsh medium primary education, thereby encouraging transition and in turn promoting and supporting Welsh medium schools in key areas of the county borough. Puthcall was identified as one of the 4 key locations that would benefit from the Welsh medium childcare provision. It was considered that such facilities at these strategic locations would help support transition from childcare to Welsh medium primary education. A bid for funding was submitted to Welsh Government, and in September 2018, the then Minister for Welsh Language and Lifelong Learning announced the successful outcome of the process, and Bridgend County Borough Council was awarded £2.6 million of capital grant funding for the 4 provisions, that is Leader, Betws, Ogwen Valley, Bridgend Town and Puthcall. This funding was subsequently increased to £2.8 million in March 2021 as the pre-tender estimates received for both schemes indicated that the originally allocated budget was insufficient. Following a desktop appraisal of options for developing the Welsh Medium Seedling School with co-located childcare in the Puthcall area, a report was submitted to Cabinet in September 2021, and approval was received to submit an expression of interest to Welsh Government in respect of a second tranche of Welsh Medium capital grant funding. Welsh Government subsequently approved in principle the expressions of interest. The Welsh Medium Capital Grant commits Welsh Government to 100% of the Seedling School scheme funding, but only upon the approval of the business justification case. The proposed Seedling School is a starter class with 30 full-time equivalent nursery places and 30 reception places. It's proposed that the seedling provision will be operated and governed by Ysgol y Ferch Osger, and the pupils that transition to that school at year 1 to conclude their primary education, that is, until a Welsh medium primary school is established in Puthcall. The proposed childcare provision is for 16 full-time or 32 part-time childcare places, together with 6 places for 0 to 2 provision, offering full care for potentially birth to 4 years, with after-school and holiday provision to offer full wraparound Welsh medium care. It's proposed that the childcare will be operated by a private provider. Suitable development sites in Puthcall area, as you know, Leader, are severely limited. However, desktop feasibility studies undertaken by the local authority technical team have identified land on the existing Puthcall primary school site as being suitable to accommodate both the seedling school and the childcare facility. An all-weather pitch would be provided at Puthcall Primary School to compensate for the land utilised by the provision, and the all-weather pitch can be treated as if it were a significant asset to the school. Notwithstanding the fact there is no statutory requirement to consult on the proposal, the Education and Family Support Directorate wishes to undertake a non-code public consultation by means of the consultation sections of the Council website to obtain stakeholder views. The outcome will be subsequently reported to Cabinet. It is currently estimated the proposal progresses to completion. The new provision will open in January 25. As previously stated, the £2.8 million of funding for the childcare provision has already been approved by Welsh Government. In November 22, Council gave permission for a capital budget for the Seedling School's design and survey costs, and it's worth noting the Welsh Government funding streams for Welsh Medium Capital Grant and Welsh Medium Childcare are exclusively for capital funding. Therefore, there is no Welsh Government revenue funding. The delegated school budget for Ysgol of Esgyrn would be adjusted through the funding formula to account for the seedling provision. Excuse me, and any additional revenue running costs in respect of the new seedling school would be met from the school's delegated budget. All capital costs, including the proposed all-weather pitch, should be met from the capital grants allocated to the scheme. However, whether grant funding proves sufficient would depend on the tender return prices. The proposed consultation exercise costs would be negligible and would be funded from existing school modernisation revenue budgets. Therefore, Leader, I take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9 that Cabinet permission is sought to consult on a proposal to establish a Welsh Medium Seedling School and child provision for the Puthcall area on land at the Puthcall Primary School site. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Blundell, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As Lindsay has outlined there, this is the next step on the stage to get this Puthcall Welsh Medium Seedling School on the way. So this, cast your minds back to the last cabinet and the last full council, we took a step further. This is another step closer to it now, opening this consultation with stakeholders. You'll see in the report alludes to an all-weather pitch to go alongside Puthcall Primary School. This is again good news, bringing community assets into the community and the heart of the community in our schools. So on that note, Leader, I'm going to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you for moving the recommendations, Councillor Blundell. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. I also welcome the report, and I'm quite excited that we're going to have a Welsh school in Puthcall. I'll second the report, but I do have one question, if that's okay. As we'll be all aware, car parking is an issue in majority of our schools in Bridgend. So how are we going to be addressing the car parking issue at this new school, please?
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Farr. As with all new builds, there would be a detailed design of the build, and this would be supported by a full transport impact assessment. There would also be an equalities impact assessment for the site in place as well, where the voice of obviously stakeholders such as the public living near the school would be taken into consideration. The transport assessment would consider the overall impact of the development of all transport modes to the school. It would set out proposals to minimise the impact of the development and also promote measures to encourage sustainable and environmentally friendly transport. Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Lindsay. If that answers your question, Councillor Farr.
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Next, we've got Councillor Spanzik, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just a few comments on the welcome addition of a new all-weather pitch. And perhaps a word of caution, because we use the term all-weather pitch, and it can mean various types of all pitches of various costs, from a red grass to sand carpet to 3G, 4G, all different construction costs and all quite different maintenance costs. It's welcome, but I think that needs to be sort of borne out what the school perhaps and what the community would like, which takes me to another point. I'm not sure if this could or would be a community facility as well, because we have lots of great facilities in schools, but then outside school hours they could be used by the community. I take it this one, there's no proposal for floodlights, so it perhaps wouldn't be that suitable for evening use for the community. And even if it was proposed, maybe the planning grounds might not with houses next to it. So just wondering with the future for more community use, and to make sure whatever's constructed, the maintenance costs are borne, because we had scrutiny yesterday and there was some sort of discussion about, I'm not sure how factual it is, some clubs are discouraged from not being able to use some of all-weather sites in schools because of the cost. So they're on wet, muddy grass sites, and they feel they can't go onto other sites. So it's an evolving picture, but I think it needs perhaps a bit more thought on what we are providing in schools for future generations.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. Important point there, though, that all-weather pitch would be a welcome facility, because there's no such provision at the moment on site for Puthcall Primary school, and of course when the weather is not pleasant and is wet or very cold, then obviously that has an impact on the ability to enjoy outdoor activities. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Spanser, thanks for the very important points you raised there. Firstly, with regard to maintenance, that's absolutely right. It's something the schools with these facilities do need to be mindful of. It's important that they are maintained. The second point with regard to the community use, as part of all new bills, there is an element with regard to Welsh Government funding, with regard to how they use for community focus facilities. So there's obviously something that we would be minded to exploit and make available, but it would need to be managed. The question around floodlighting, that wouldn't be part of the original build, but again, we are aware of some schools who have achieved additional floodlighting facilities post-build through different grants, some of them from Welsh Government. So the 3 points, Leader, Councillor Spanser raised are really important ones, and certainly something we can feed back to Cabinet once the consultation is completed.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Is that okay, Councillor Spanser? Thanks, Councillor Spanser. Councillor Williams is next, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Can I firstly welcome the increased funding from Welsh Government from 2.6 to 2.8 million. But can I ask that the pre-tender estimate, does that align, I suppose, with our aspirations for our 2030 carbon neutral agenda?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. And again, thanks, Councillor Williams. Again, a very important question. Yes, I can confirm that the scheme will be targeting net zero carbon.
Should we be happy with that, Councillor Williams? And I'm sure the 2030 champion will be even happier with that, Councillor Spanser.
More than happy. Welcome.
Thank you. And of course, Councillor Williams is right to highlight the funding and investment we're receiving from Welsh Government, full funding for this seedling school. But it is important to emphasise that it isn't only about the reception and nursery places for over 60 children, but also the 32 places for childcare. And that childcare isn't just during term time and isn't just during school time. It's also during the school holidays and after school as well. So we will be offering that wraparound offer of childcare, which is particularly important to working parents who are struggling with balancing the different commitments. I'm sure this will be welcomed by residents of parents and carers in Porthcawl. I know that the seedling school is a long cherished dream of many in the community in Porthcawl, and we're another step closer in achieving that reality. The recommendation's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Lindsay, and I'm sure we will be receiving future reports on progress of that exciting scheme. The next report we will receive is a report on the Housing Wales Act 2014, and that is a report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and that report will be presented by the Head of Partnerships and Performance. So over to you, please, Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Today I've got myself Joe Ginn, who works in the operational housing team, to support as well if there's any questions from the floor. In terms of the purpose of the report is to highlight the changes made to Welsh Government's homelessness legislation in respect to the new priority need category for households, namely street homeless, and seek Cabinet approval to apply for the intentionality test to this new category. In terms of background, the Housing Service operates within the legal framework of the Housing Wales Act 2014 and the Social Housing Allocation Policy SHAP. The Act and SHAP were implemented on the 27th of April 2015, and the SHAP having been approved by Cabinet on the 31st of March 2015. The Act places a duty on the Council to assist those who are threatened with homelessness within 56 days by taking all reasonable steps to prevent and relieve homelessness. At the start of the COVID pandemic, Welsh Government introduced an all-in approach to homelessness and directed local authorities that no one was to be without accommodation due to public health imperative, making everyone a priority need. Welsh Government's intention is not to revert to pre-COVID legislation when considering vulnerability and priority need for accommodation. Earlier this year, Welsh Government consulted with local authorities to permanently change regulations so that rough sleepers were considered a priority need for accommodation. However, Welsh Government's proposals are wider than this, and as of 24th of October 2022, anyone that is street homeless is a priority need for accommodation. The Act also introduces changes in respect of how to apply intentionality test, and as defined, a person is intentionally homeless if that person deliberately does or fail to do anything in consequence of which the person ceases to occupy accommodation which is available for that person's occupation and which it would have been reasonable for that person to continue to occupy. If an intentional homeless decision is taken, the authority's housing duties to the household are reduced but not totally relieved. Section 3.6 outlines the categories for homelessness households under the Act that was approved by Cabinet back in 31st of March 2015, and they already have the test of intentionality against these. Intentionality decisions are relatively low, and between April 21 and March 22, intentionality in terms of homeless decisions represented approximately 1.3% of all homelessness outcomes in Bridgend County Borough Council. So in terms of the current situation, priority need is the provision of a temporary accommodation and represents a final homelessness duty to secure permanent accommodation. Priority need should not be mistaken for priority banding under the SHARP. While some households will be considered to fall within the priority need group, they will still receive the same level of support, albeit they will not be eligible for temporary accommodation. Welsh Government requires the Council to notify the public of the priority needs groups to which it is going to apply the intentionality test. Once this decision is made, following your approval, the Council will need to inform Welsh Government and publicise the decision 14 days before legislation is in relation to the intentionality. These current changes suggested by Welsh Government have been with the view of them reviewing the entire Act in the future. In terms of any impact or effect upon framework, procedure rules, Equalities Act and wellbeing in future generations, there's no impact, and there'll be no financial implications on the approval of these recommendations. But before I take Cabinet to the recommendations, I'd like Joe to run through an operational scenario from presentation to relief, taking into account the intentionality to give the Cabinet an understanding of the process. And following this example, I'd like to take Cabinet to the recommendations.
Thank you for that, Martin, and a very warm welcome to Joe again, our Housing Solutions team manager, and I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly then. Apologies if I haven't, Joe. So over to you, please, Joe.
Thank you. Yes, this is pronounced correctly. So the intentionality test, as Martin explained it, we look at intentionality at the absolute final point of a homelessness assessment. So there's a couple of stages to homelessness. You have homelessness prevention, where we wouldn't look at intentionality. And that prevention period, there's no finite time scale. Prevention could be a week, a month, 6 months. If we are unable to prevent somebody from becoming homeless, so that prevention is where somebody is in accommodation, they can lawfully occupy, but they're at risk of losing that, and we'll take all reasonable steps to ensure that that is either not lost, or we would take all reasonable steps to secure alternative accommodation. If that's not successful, we then look at a homelessness relief duty. Homelessness relief is when somebody actually is homeless, and that's when we look at a priority need category. And if they're deemed to be in priority need, that's when we provide interim accommodation or temporary accommodation. That period lasts for 56 days, and after that period, that we then have a duty to consider whether that final homeless duty is made. Is going to be accepted, and it's the final homeless duty where we apply intentionality. So we go through, we call them tests. Intentionality has always been applied, even in the legislation that it was a predecessor to this Act. So we look at if somebody's eligible for our assistance, and eligibility looks at things like your status within the UK, whether you're homeless, whether you've got a priority need. And then when we pick up that or investigate whether to pick up that final homeless duty, which is a duty for us to secure accommodation for that household, we have to look at whether or not their homelessness was intentional. And by that, we mean, did they do something to cause themselves becoming homeless? So some examples we can give: if a household presents to us and the landlord has served notice to them and they've ultimately lost that accommodation because of rent arrears. So somebody could have built up, and we've got a case where somebody has £14,000 worth of property related debt or rent arrears. Then we would investigate whether that action has caused them to become homeless. And if we say yes, it has, well, they're intentionally homeless because that action has caused this consequence. Now, when we look at intentionality in that sort of circumstance, we would look at, why did the arrears accrue? Is it as a result of just a willful refusal to pay the rent? Or is it as a result of maybe their benefits had stopped, they'd lost their employment, they were affected by bedroom tax? Are they fleeing domestic abuse and therefore had to leave a property and were still on that tenancy? That would be unintentionally homeless. But if there was a willful refusal to pay that rent, then we would look at that as being intentionally homeless. So the support from the moment that applicant or household contacts us up to that intentionality decision, everybody has the same level of support from housing. They'd have the same referrals to support agencies. They'd have exactly the same support from a housing officer when looking for alternative accommodation, when undertaking their support needs assessment. Everything would apply the same. The only difference is when you get to that intentionality decision, if somebody is determined to be intentionally homeless, they would drop down a band on the register. So if you got to that final stage and we said, we've now got a duty to secure accommodation for you, you're eligible, homeless, priority need, you're not intentionally homeless, you've got a local connection to Bridgend, we would put you in band A of the Common Housing Register. If you were deemed to be intentionally homeless, you would go into band B of the Common Housing Register. So I hope that clarifies or provides more information as to its application.
That is very helpful, clarification. I will bring in Councillor Williams and then Councillor Good. Councillor Williams first then, please.
I don't have a question. My hand goes up. Maybe if Councillor Good would like to start as a...
Very kind of you, Councillor Williams.
It is very kind of him. It's nice to see the camera working now as well, which is great. I just wanted to thank both Martin and Joanne and the whole housing team for the report. I'm happy to move it, and I just thought it'd be worth reiterating really that while people may become intentionally homeless, I think it is important to be clear that that doesn't remove our duty to them, and that we will work, as Martin has said, and the entire team will work with those individuals to make sure that they are as safe and looked after as they can be, and they are willing to be. I mean, obviously, they're often people with very complex needs, and I know the team do a lot of work for that, but I just want to be very clear that regardless of whether you are homeless due to circumstances outside your control or deemed otherwise, we do have a duty of care to these people, and I know the team work very hard to ensure that duty is carried out. Thank you, Chair.
I absolutely agree, Councillor Good, and we'll take this opportunity, because we take every opportunity to remind anyone out there who's experiencing difficulty in paying the rent or paying the mortgage and think that they are at risk of being made homeless. Get in touch with us now. We will work to try and prevent you becoming homeless in the first place. Unfortunately, we still see too many cases where people leave it too late. They don't think there is help available, and there is help available to try and maintain people in their own homes. So please do get in touch if you are experiencing problems. Councillor Williams is next, please.
Yes, Leader, and I echo those comments. That was the thrust of my initial point. Really, is to seek early assistance if you need it, because we are here to help. We provide a service. However, I suppose it wouldn't be it would be wrong of me if I didn't acknowledge that currently in town, and I walked across for a coffee prior to this meeting, and it does appear to be a little community now of sort of set up in Caroline Street. It appears to be 3 beds there. So now I will notice that. Elected members notice that. The general public notice that. So I just want to reassure them, I suppose, what our role is in engaging with those rough sleepers then on Caroline Street, and what's our obligation to try and assist them.
It's an important question there, and it was a question that's been asked and answered before, but it's important that we have that update and have that reassurance that efforts are always made, aren't they, to support those people who are sleeping rough. I'm sure you can give an update, Martin, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Williams. In terms of the question, it's very pertinent and, yeah, understandable, very visible. I can assure you that we work with all our rough sleepers, but it's a choice as well. It's a decision that some people will make, that they won't accept support. All I can reiterate, the availability for housing to support these individuals is there. Is seen by the exponential growth in my budget in terms of temporary accommodation. We've seen budget pressures agreed by council, circa up to £4.5 million in terms of temporary accommodation. But unfortunately, working with these individuals is bi-directional. They've got to want to engage and work with us. It's unfortunate, but there's some choices that the persons make. But you know, we do still work them. We've got a 365 team that's out there engaging. But it just takes that negative opportunity, that engagement, to actually bring them over into across in terms of our support. But unfortunately, some persons right now, this time, you know, it's very difficult to understand in these weather conditions as well, why they make that choice. I know all our projects are full and they're supporting those individuals well, but unfortunately, 1 or 2 persons that, you know, recognise. We discussed it in the bi-weekly homeless cell in terms of what we can do as a multi-agency approach. It's not just us as a local authority, but health, police, and third sector agencies to support these individuals. But unfortunately, there's a choice element to some of these persons' decisions.
Thank you for that, Martin. And again, I think that would be useful if members didn't know, and members of the public, that we have fortnightly, weekly meetings where we discuss case by case the rough sleepers. Often know the individuals very well, and we've made efforts in the past to try and work with those individuals, and that will continue, won't it? Particularly, and there's a particular focus during these difficult periods of cold weather.
Yeah, we've been discussing in our homeless cell, what was originally weekly, now it's bi-weekly, in terms of each of these individuals. And you're right, Leader. We know these persons by first name terms and engagement. Some of them circle out multiple projects that are in and out, and we support. But these are the cohort of service users that are really on that extreme side. And, you know, it'd be nothing better than having everyone in a safe, dry accommodation. But, you know, that's a choice. But we will still keep working with all these individuals, because you never know the opportunity that come with it. That mind shift might change, whatever. So,
thanks for that, Martin. I'll bring Joe in as well, please.
Thank you. It was just to expand on the meetings that we have. So we do have the fortnightly homeless cell meeting where we identify all rough sleepers within Bridgend as a whole, not just the town centres. We've got multi-agency support packages for those individuals. Our cell meetings consist of our STELs, other statutory departments, colleagues in the police, and we've also got a health outreach team that consists of various nurses and support workers that will engage with the rough sleepers. As Martin alluded to, some of there are challenges in accommodating some of those individuals who can present with some complex needs. So it's very difficult to identify the most suitable type of accommodation for them. But in our most recent meeting yesterday, we've acknowledged, of course, the considerable dip in the weather temperatures that we're having. So we do have a plan to look at everybody that we have in accommodation to see if we can move them onto a less, I suppose, supported type of accommodation to free up capacity for those individuals that are sleeping rough still, and the rough sleepers intervention team engage with them on a daily basis. So the support is there to try and get them off the streets, and that is very much dependent on the more suitable type of accommodation and the willingness to engage in that, because whilst we've offered accommodation to some, they've chosen not to accept. We've recently supported some into privately rented accommodation, and we have some rough sleepers that are not from the area, and sometimes they pass through, decide to stay, or pass through and move on to another area and come back. So it's just to provide reassurance that every effort is going into to support those individuals.
That is reassuring, and may I take the opportunity to thank you, Joe, for the work that you and the team undertaken a daily basis. And I know workload has gone through the roof, hasn't it, since the pandemic, but I know how dedicated you are. I think every elected member must know you and have received emails from you updating them on individual cases. Very detailed updates always, Joe, and I know how your team always try to do the best for people out there. I know that isn't always perhaps understood or appreciated because people are desperate, and we're trying to support people when there's too limited stock and too many people who need our help. But we do our best, and we try to treat people fairly and consistently as well, and that's important. And part of this policy is around that, isn't it? Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to note before we move on that if any member of the public is watching this, or any colleagues indeed, and they have concerns about people who they think might be sleeping rough or they've seen sleeping rough in the area, you can report that to a website called StreetLink, which is streetlink.org.uk, which will then come through to our team and allow us to give support to those individuals. So I would encourage, particularly as the weather gets colder, that if anyone does see anyone or is concerned about someone, that they do report it to us so that we can get the team involved. Thank you, Leader.
Well, thank you for making that point, Councillor Good. We were asked that question in scrutiny only last week, because there is a wide range of agencies and options available for homeless people, but we would suggest that the people don't approach a homeless person, that this is an option to report it in case we have, and we often have, tried to engage with that individual. And I think this is a safe way of reporting it and making sure that we will check out that person and they're getting as much support as we can offer them, and they will accept from us. And I think before we move on, it is important to stress that this test of intentionality is applied to all cases, but 98.7% of cases have shown that people do not make themselves intentionally homeless. They do not. They find themselves in those very desperate situations through no fault of their own, and that is why it's so important that we provide the support that we can to those people. Okay, thank you very much, Martin, and thank you very much, Joe. We'll now move on to the next report from the Chief Officer of Finance, Performance and Change, and once again that will be presented by the Head of Partnership Services, and it's a proposal on the continuation of housing support services in Bridgend. Martin, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've got Ryan Jones with me today. If we have any questions I can't answer. So In terms of the purpose of the report is to seek approval from Cabinet to modify existing contract in line with the Council's contract procedure rules in order to allow the continuation of the housing-related support services on the Coity Road. In terms of background, a contract has been in place since 2018 following a procurement exercise. The contract is with the Wallage for the delivery of 3 housing-related support projects located on the Coity Road Bridgend area. Housing-related support services provide interventions which prevent people from becoming homeless, stabilising their housing situations, or help homeless people to find and keep accommodation. If I can take you to 3.3, it outlines the 3 specific projects, Tiago, Cornerstone and Vesta. The current annual contract value is £358,170 per annum. The contract is funded by the BCBC's Housing Support Grant, and the total value of the contract is £1.79 million. In terms of the current situation, the current contract is in place with the Wallage due to expire on the 31st of March 2023. In line with BCBC's contract procedure rules, a procurement exercise is required to ensure the continued service provision on an ongoing basis. On December the 1st, 2022, the Renting Homes Act Wales came into force, and a future report to Cabinet will outline the wider implications of the Act, but it's clear that there will be implications for providers of temporary and supported accommodation. One of the key implications for temporary and supported accommodation services will be the potential of individuals to be owed an occupation contract under the Act, which provides greater security of tenure to occupants when compared to the current operational arrangements. Despite the Act coming into force on the 1st of December 2022, Welsh Government are considering changes to the Act. This is due to feedback from the housing and homelessness sector, particularly around the implications for temporary and supported accommodation providers. At this juncture, these details, timescales or implications are unknown. However, they could impact on the delivery of the projects detailed at Coity Road. Therefore, as proposed, due to the uncertainty under Section 3 of the BCBC procurement rules, CPR 3.3.6, which is at Section 4.8 of the report, that a modification is opted for, which will give us an additional 6 months that will essentially delay the procurement process and extend the current contract in place with the Wallage, whilst the implications of the Renting Homes Wales Act 2016 is fully understood. A 6-month extension will be within 10% of the total contract value, equating to £213,477. This will be funded by the BCBC's Housing Support Grant. The approval of the proposed modification of the existing contract will move the contract start date to the 1st of October 2023. This will allow for a full procurement exercise to be undertaken, including mobilisation of a new contract and consideration of 2P. The process will begin in around March 2023. When hopefully a full understanding of the changes to the Act will be available to support that procurement process. There's no effect or impact upon the policy framework or procedure rules or the Equalities Act and the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. In terms of the financial implications, a contract modification detailed in 4.9 is within the 10% of the current overall contract value. The cost of the modification will be funded by the BCBC's Housing Support Grant. Therefore, could I take Cabinet the recommendations?
Thank you for that, Martin. Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the report, Martin. I'm happy to move the recommendations. I think what is important here is that we do take time to understand how the Act is going to work. Obviously, it's taken a long time for it to come in, and now it has. I think, as ever, it's important to understand how these are actually going to impact the sector. And certainly, as we've seen in the previous report, we have unprecedented pressures on homelessness already within the borough, and what I don't want to see is us to be in a position where we don't have the coverage from organisations like the Wallage that provide an amazing service within the borough to our homeless residents. So I welcome this report. I think it is important that we take the time to understand how the Act is going to work, but also then, when the time is right, have a proper procurement process to ensure that we are getting the best value for money and the best service for residents. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Councillor Good. Thank you for moving the recommendations. Do we have a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Williams.
Leader.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Farr. Councillor Williams, please.
Happy to second, Leader, and I think it is important to say that we don't sort of use this facility haphazardly. We suspend procedure rules for very good reason, and I think the very good reason is there's emerging legislation obviously will influence the new contract going forward. So on this occasion, I'm happy to second. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, you're right, Councillor Williams. What we can do, and I suggest we do, is we write to the Minister for climate change, who has a responsibility for housing, and encourage Welsh Government to make any policy changes that they are going to make as quickly as possible, so that we can progress the commissioning of the service in the future, and reflect what any changes that are being proposed in that, because actually we have a limited timescale now in which to undertake that work. Martin, please.
I'll thank you, Leader. I'll take that on board. I just want to clarify the point. We're not actually suspending the CPRs, but we're just modifying the contracts. We're extending. So we're just asking because we've got that 10% margin where we can extend the contract, which equates to that 6-month period. So we're not actually suspending the CPRs. I just want to clarify that point. But to take on board, we will be writing to Welsh Government because we need to understand what this Act and the implications are in terms of the third sector provision, because we don't want to have something that's untenable, that these organisations such as the Wallage, Pobl, etc., can't support these individuals within these premises.
Thanks, Martin. And we've extended it on the same pro rata basis in terms of cost, which is to be welcomed. I can't see that anyone else wants to come in. My only other comment would be that I would suggest that there's a briefing for local members. We've got 3 new local members there, and just so they understand the services that are being provided locally and the support that's been made and our relationship with partners there. Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you very much, Ryan. No doubt we will receive a further report on this once we're clear about the implications of any Welsh Government change, because of course the implications will be wider than just this provision.
Yeah, we surely will be bringing back a report in terms of the Act and the implications and whatever the necessary changes are.
Thank you, Martin. The next report we have is an amendment to the contract procedure rules. And when we've received that report, I suggest that we receive the report to the Director of Social Services and Wellbeing on the updated fostering allowance policy. Over to you, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of recording, my name is Kelly Watson, Chief Officer, Legal and Regulatory Services. The purpose of this report today is to seek approval from Cabinet to amend the lower financial threshold for obtaining 3 quotations for works, goods and services from our current £5,000 to £10,000 within the contract procedure rules. If approved, this will take effect from the 1st of January 2023. And if approved, Cabinet's also recommended to recommend this proposal to Council as an amendment to the Constitution. Cabinet members will be aware that the Council is required to ensure the contract procedure rules, which form part of our Constitution, are reflective of current market pressures and are fit for purpose. In order to procure goods, services and works above £5,000, currently a service must obtain 3 quotes. This has proved to be unmanageable due to the volume of quotations across the Council at the moment, leading to delays on service delivery. There are a number of reasons for this, including the war in the Ukraine, which has reduced the amount of grain available globally and the supply of many raw components and imported materials. This has increased food prices and impacted the supply chain. Increases in spend across the Council has also been attributed to the increase in cost of wholesale gas and electricity, and Cabinet will be aware that this, coupled with the increase of the cost of consumer goods and supply chain bottlenecks, has led to the consumer price inflation, CPI now standing at 11.1% when the report was written. A benchmarking exercise has shown that an increase of an increase to £10,000 for obtaining 3 quotations is in line with neighbouring councils. Cabinet members, a copy of the proposed amendments to the contract procedure rules are attached to report at Appendix 1, and I therefore take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. I think this is a sensible adjustment. It brings us in line with our neighbouring authorities, and for reasons given the inflationary pressures that we're facing now, the 5,000 limit doesn't no longer makes any sense to us. So I'm happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second it, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Just one reassurance, Kelly, I'm sure you can provide that there will still obviously be an audit trail around any decisions, and a number of safeguards will of course still be in place around any decisions that are made around procurement, and this is a practice that is in place across a number of local authorities across Wales, and actually will be bringing us into line with most of the neighbouring local authorities.
Yes, Leader. There is still a process to be followed when you're obtaining 3 quotes, so that will be done via business support sections, and that is submitted and then authorised by a line manager before it's approved. As you said, this does bring us in line with other authorities, and even if this change is approved, we're still at the lower end. Some of our neighbouring authorities are at 15, and there are some in Wales that are at 25. So we're still at the lower end, but we feel that the incremental approach is appropriate at this time.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm conscious the screen has changed, so you can't see if I've got hands raised on the screen has changed. So my point was, it's welcome the £10,000, right? As the Kelly just said, I think it should be kept under review in the future because things are moving, especially when you go higher up the scale of tenders, or I think it's 100,000 above. It's a minimum of 5 tenders required, and maybe that could be looked at in the future. It's perhaps a minimum of 3, still kept in line with all the procedures. But I think there's a lot of work goes into sometimes finding a minimum of 5 tenders, and perhaps a further report in due course can bring that forward and look at other options to simplify and ease the process. Thank you.
Kelly, please.
Thank you, Councillor Spanswick. Yes, we will keep the CPRs under constant reviews. Obviously, for some thresholds, our hands are tied because we have to follow procurement regulations, but it will be kept under review, and my proposal is that we bring something back after 6 months to see how we're doing then, unless obviously there's another big change in the CPI in the meantime.
Thank you for that, Kelly and Councillor Spanzik, and just add that it's included in our rules that obviously if, for example, we've received a grant and a condition of that grant is that we seek a certain number of quotes, and of course we will follow the grant procedure rules and any other rules that can sometimes apply when we're commissioning and procuring services and goods. Okay, moved and seconded, and of course it will be presented to full council tomorrow if everyone's in agreement. Thank you, colleagues. So we will now receive the report of the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing on the proposed update to the Fostering Allowance Policy. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. The purpose of the report before you this afternoon is to provide Cabinet with details of the updated Fostering Allowances Policy, and this report follows from previous reports brought to Cabinet in March this year and in June this year. And the aim of those reports was to make sure that our allowances and indeed the uplift for foster carers was such that enabled us to retain and recruit the very best foster carers here in Bridgend. I'm very pleased to say that we're succeeding in doing that. There was, however, an administrative error in the report, which is set out in 3.2, in that the fostering allowance for children aged 11 to 15 years should have been £177.38, and the amount that we pay for this year for 11 to 15 years was not included in the report. The tables in this report correct that amount, and the correct allowances are in line with Welsh Government recommended rates. And as we're working as part of regional and national fostering framework arrangements, it is important that we work in accordance with Welsh Government guidance in this matter. I can provide assurance as set out under 3.4 that no foster carer received an erroneous amount, and the policy was amended to include the correct financial information as set out in 3.3. And indeed, in July this year, the fostering financial policy was further updated to change the rates of allowance following agreement at Cabinet to award a 7% increase to the allowances paid to Albridge End foster carers, which would be backdated to the start of the financial year, and the introduction of 2 weeks paid respite for Albridge End foster carers. And my colleague Steve Howells is on the call as well if there are any questions about the impact that this has had on foster carers and how they have responded to these increases and the changes to the policy. So the current proposal is that the 7% increase to foster carer allowance agreed by Cabinet in July has now been paid to foster carers, and that the administrative error was amended but requires Cabinet approval in order to be the policy of the Council. There are no further financial implications from this report, because those financial implications were set out in the reports received earlier this year, and recommendations in the report are set out in 9.1 and 9.2. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm happy to move the report. I think it's also worth drawing attention to the excellence that we have here in Bridgend. Whilst it's notable that we're bringing this here for an amendment to make it right, as we should do, Becky and Pete won a Fostering Excellence Award earlier this year. And I think it's interesting to note their quote, because their quote for us, when we asked them for something to advertise why foster carers are so important in Bridgend, what they actually said was, every day there's an achievement, a glimmer of hope for a new milestone, a smile that melts you, or a determined young person that just won't give up. That alone gives us the strength to keep doing what we do. We're also very conscious of the fact that we have an increase in our looked after children, and we need more foster carers now more than ever. It's vitally important to all the youngsters that we support in Bridgend County Borough. Thank you very much, Leader.
Echo that. Thank you for moving the recommendation. Do you have a second for that recommendation?
Happy to second that recommendation, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spanzik. And hopefully you can confirm, Claire, that following the very successful John Lewis Christmas advertising campaign, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm told has really hit home with lots of families across the UK. Hopefully we've seen an uptake in interest in fostering, and fingers crossed we can convert some of those inquiries into forever homes and homes for people that need fostering as well. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Steve might be able to confirm the exact figures, but I do know that we did see an increase in the number of inquiries around fostering, which is really positive. I think the advert is just excellent, isn't it? And it's good to see that social responsibility there. And hopefully, as you say, and we'll be working very hard to make sure this is the case, we will convert those initial inquiries into new foster carers here in Bridgend as part of our in-house service.
Thank you for that, Claire. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with that? Thank you. Thanks very much, Claire and Steve. We'll now return to the sequencing of the agenda as published, and the next report on the published agenda is a proposal for the change to the consultation process for traffic regulation orders, and that is a report of the Corporate Director for Communities. Janine, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Leader and Cabinet. For the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale. I'm the Corporate Director of Communities. So yes, Leader, the excuse me. The purpose of the report that's in front of you today, Cabinet, is to adopt a revised procedure when we are consulting with local members, individuals and organisations, when we're giving notice about a permanent traffic regulation order, a TRO, and in essence it's about streamlining that process as we go forward. The report is quite complex, but if you may let me take you to a few salient points within it. So the background to this is contained in section 3. And in essence, back in 2021, last year, Welsh Government published its Wales Transport Strategy. And in there, they identified the key priority, which was to change the default speed limit from 30 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour. Now, this would take effect in built-up areas, and the reason behind it was to reduce traffic-related injuries and fatalities, and to make walking and cycling safer and more attractive in essence. Now, Welsh Government set up a task force to work with local authorities to identify the roads that will be an exemption to this legislation. So we've now identified roads which should be exempt, and we're working through those now in the borough to make sure that we can abide by this new legislation. So to date in BCBC, we have identified over 100 roads that would be exempt to this traffic regulation order. And that means that we want to retain or amend the speed limits as part of that. Now, Welsh Government have set a deadline of the 17th of September 2023, next year, to have the rollout of the 20 mile an hour restricted road status in place. So literally it will take effect. So this report looks at how the process can be streamlined in order to allow that considerable volume of traffic regulation orders to be progressed. And if I just give you a little bit of background, Cabinet, we usually look at between 5 and 10 a year, and this is over 100 within 9 months next year. So a considerable amount of work we'd need to undertake. So section 4 of the report sets out the current situation, and there's an awful lot of detail in here about the traffic regulation order process. So I'm just going to draw your attention to the points where we're going to make some changes. Now, a significant number of organisations are consulted when we put together a TRO. And as you would expect, some of these organisations include ambulance, fire service, bus operators, road haulage associations, freight transport associations, all those that use roads as part of their business. Also, before any order is made, we have to consult with the Chief Officer of the Police, and that's under the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984. Now, this report goes to set out the process for making a statutory public notice, and it also sets out the process for the consideration of any objections that we get. An important part, I would say as well, Leader, that probably isn't as strong in this report as it should be, is that local members in the wards that we're making traffic regulation orders on are incredibly important, and we would work with those and inform them about what we're doing as we move this policy forward. If I can take you to section 4.4 of the report, it outlines the proposed changes to the process in order to streamline it. And this is because of the volume of work required. Now, paragraph 4.5.1 sets out that we're going to pass responsibilities for amending the schemes and sending out information to consultees from the scheme originator, which is the legal services, to highway officers. And this is how the report progresses, Leader and Cabinet. What we are trying to do is to remove some of the onerous work that would take up an awful lot of legal officers' time and move it on to highway officers where there is additional capacity. So this change about moving responsibility from legal to highways is also reflected in paragraph 4.3 and paragraph 4.4 of the report in Appendix 1. Also, another section where objections are acknowledged and responded to, they will now move from legal services, who will acknowledge where there are objections. However, highway officers will now determine if they are relevant and valid, and will determine if a formal response is required. And that was previously the responsibility of our legal officers. Another change to streamline the process, Leader, is that highway officers now will make minor modifications to the traffic regulation orders, and also one of the final changes is that the determination of an appeals panel function will be a delegated function of the Cabinet Member for Communities. So that is, in this regard, currently Councillor John Spanswick. He will be able to determine appeals against the making of a traffic regulation order. So all of these changes should ensure, Leader, that the TROs are given due consideration, incredibly important, but that the process is now streamlined appropriately. So please can I take you to section 9, which is the recommendations, and there's 2 recommendations for you to consider. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for the report, Janine. Councillor Spanswick, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Jean, for the report. And first, put it in order, I'd like to move the report. And there's one part, I don't know if I need to make an amendment to it, or just, you've touched on it in paragraph 4.51 about the consultation, and where in 451 it states appropriate local ward members, and then in brackets, this is not specifically required under the relevant legislation, which I think that text could be removed, because it might not be required under legislation, but it is required under a democratic process, I would argue. So while you would acknowledge the fact that local ward members will be consulted, perhaps that bit in brackets could be removed. But other than that, I look forward to this streamlining the scheme. Hopefully there's not too many appeals come my direction. But there is a lot of work being done now and over the next year. And look forward to, I think, the new year, Welsh Government are going to start publicising the whole scheme a lot more, the 20-mile-hour traffic scheme, because there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of information that needs to be shared amongst the public out there to realise what's heading our way for next September. Thanks again.
Thanks, Councillor Spanswick. You're very hopeful, aren't you, about the number of appeals, because we do know that there's a large number of routes and sections of the highway across the borough that it is proposed that will be exempt from the 20-mile-per-hour limit, and inevitably that will generate some interest from the public, and I'd be very surprised if that isn't in the form of engagement in this process. But that is why the process needs to be streamlined, isn't it, Councillor Spanswick and Janine, is because we will be facing a level of workload in this area that we haven't experienced before, because this will affect all of the county borough. And I would certainly support, as I've referred to outside of this meeting, I would certainly support the inclusion of local members as a required consultee on any changes around traffic regulation orders in the county borough. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded with that amendment from Councillor Spanswick. Well, I've just seconded it, but yeah, I'll get someone else to do it. Councillor Good, do you want to do it for the...
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Janine, please. Deputy Leader, please.
Thanks very much, Leader. I suppose the question that I've got is, we're always aware that any traffic orders or any concerns around speeding in our wards, we raise concerns with the police, and if we've got a 20-mile-an-hour traffic order on that road, they can't change it, or will they be able to just state their discontent at what we're imposing?
Janine, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, Deputy, it's a very interesting question, actually, but a key consultee as part of any TRO is the police, and they will get an opportunity to to tell us whether they agree or not with this consultation, with the work that we're doing. But again, of course, this is a national scheme across Wales that's been introduced by Welsh Government, and this will be applied unless there's exemptions. And the exemptions are roads that will not be 20 mile an hour. I think that it's well recognised by the police. Of course, the enforcement of those speed limits it's a police matter. So I think going forward that will be interesting. But again, there's some very good reasons why it's been introduced. It won't be without issues, I'm quite sure. But it's the Welsh Government have a very clear safety message behind what's behind this implication. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jean. Myself and Councillor Spanswick know from the work of the working group that Welsh Government have set up that there's police involvement at an Assistant Chief Constable level. So there's been an Assistant Chief Constable level leading the work for police forces, all 4 police forces from across Wales on this, because it is such a major change to so many of our communities in terms of motorists, and we're going to have to respond to that as part of the together with the police. And what we will need to do is actually establish that relationship at that local level as well, so that response is structured and effective in terms of the exemption route. Deputy Leader, please.
Thanks very much, Janine. That's really helpful. I suppose for me, what I'm concerned about is we already know that residents' complaints are that there is no enforcement on our roads in relation to speeding. So how are we going to ensure that that is done? And whilst I appreciate it's not our responsibility, I think we need to have that conversation with police early on, because otherwise what is the point? We're trying to change everybody's behaviours out in our communities. If we don't have any enforcement, we're not going to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Leader. Janine, please. Oh, Councillor Spanswick.
Very briefly, and valid point, but I'll go back to, I think, one of the early meetings with the Minister on this topic, and description, this is a bit like the seatbelt laws in the late 70s. It's generational change. The police are saying basically there will not be any additional police enforcement. The capacity is not there. This is down to generational change and changing of attitudes, and now we design future housing estates as one example, but it is down to a change of attitude how we drive. And I'm assuming the Safety Camera Partnership, they will still use the same locations they are, but they'll be set to 20 mile an hour. So there'll be a lot more people probably having fixed penalty notice early on until people get to realise you have to drive at 20 mile an hour. Generational change.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanswick, and no doubt we will receive a further report on the introduction of 20 mile per hour zones across Bridgend, because it is such a big change for us, and it will require a cultural change. It will require physical change across the county borough in terms of several hundred, possibly for the thousands of signs being changed and moved. But it will also require a different approach from the police. But there is no additional resources for enforcement. It will be deploying that existing enforcement capacity, whether it's the mobile speed cameras or other options available to the police. It's been moved and seconded. Everyone in agreement with the recommendations? Yeah. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the second report, the Corporate Director for Communities, and that is on the proposed destination management plan for the County Borough for 2022 to 2027. Janine, please.
Oh, thank you very much, Leader. So the report that you have in front of you now, the purpose is to seek your approval of the destination management plan for Bridgend, as you rightly say, from 22 now to 2027, and approve the implementation of the resulting actions that fall out of this plan. So a bit of background, really. Tourism is incredibly significant for local prosperity and the quality of life in Bridgend. And it's also a key goal for us in our corporate plan and, of course, for Welsh Government itself. Now, back in 2019, before the pandemic, the last full year of STEAM data we have, which is the tourism-related data, had an estimated £363 million of expenditure that was put into the economy as a result of tourism, and it has, at that time, it did support over 4,000 jobs across our borough, just showing the impact that it has. However, we are mindful that we have to manage tourism in a sustainable way in order to maximise the benefits for long-term prosperity and to reduce any negative impacts. So this destination management plan is just that. It's a statement of intent to manage interests over a stated period, showing how stakeholders will work together and how we will have a sustainable tourism industry in Bridgend. Now, if I take you to section 4 of the report, the current situation. So the actual destination management plan that we're proposing is attached as Appendix 1 to your report, and if adopted today, Cabinet, it will set the framework for supporting the delivery of our tourism vision up until 2027. And the tourism vision that we have is to shape a thriving visitor economy which celebrates the unique identity of BCBC. Now, the destination management plan has been prepared with key stakeholders, and it needs to have a set of realistic expectations in it and what is achievable within the resources available, and we think we have achieved that. Now, paragraph 4.5 sets out the 4 priorities that we have to support the delivery of that vision. And in brief, let me just tell you about the 4 areas. It's about having great products and great place. That's number 1. Again, it's about having a great accommodation. We currently have 16,000 bed spaces across our borough. That's from the bed stock survey that was undertaken back in 2021. And that's a rise from previous years. Excuse me. A rise of over 3% from previous years. And it's about creating a place-making strategy. It's about having a sense of place of where we are in the borough. And that leads nicely into the second point about having a quality visitor experience. Key, really. A key part of that is local food and drink, very important. Part of having a visitor experience and authentic experiences. When we've spoken to stakeholders and done surveys, people want to come to Bridgend and feel like they're having a uniquely Welsh experience when they are here. A couple of ways that we can show that and adapt is we're doing an awful lot of work at the Maesteg Town Hall currently, creating that beautiful cultural hub out of that grade 2 listed building, 141 years old, and hopefully that'll be a centre for thriving arts and culture in the valley. And secondly, another example of using those beautiful places that we have to enhance visitor experience is the Grand Pavilion in Porthcawl, Leader and Cabinet. That is again a fantastic building, a visitor attraction, and we've currently applied for a levelling up fund bid for over 20 million to restore that pavilion and to improve it. And hopefully we'll hear early next year whether we've been successful. So just 2 examples of beautiful heritage buildings that will enhance that visitor experience. Thirdly, it's about profile raising. Incredibly important. It's about us in Bridgend having a distinctive brand. It's about having a good website and a strategy, and it's about having messages for key attractions so people really understand what is it that we have and what makes us unique. And the 4th point, which I think is incredibly important, is embedding sustainable tourism. Because of course, you know, we want people to come and visit our borough, be here and enjoy it, but we want to have it in a sustainable way. And again, that's about doing things like promoting active travel, promoting sustainable business practices. So all of that is in that document for you to see. And those are the 4 main priorities within that destination marketing plan. Now, active partnership working is critical to this. Because we're not going to be able to implement the actions in Appendix 1 without that. And we really want to refresh our partnership approach to the destination management plan, in the main by encouraging businesses and community involvement to see how tourism benefits them and to understand what's unique about our borough, and also to continue some of the very good collaboration with existing forums and structures already, such as the Bridgend Business Forum, the Coastal Partnerships, the Valleys Regional Park. So communication needs to be two-way, though. We need to listen to what's out there now and share ideas and work collaboratively if we're going to make this successful. So please let me take you to the recommendations in section 9, Leader on Cabinet, please, if you could endorse and approve this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Janine. I'll bring the Cabinet member for tourism for regeneration now, Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. Can I thank Janine for presenting the report? I think it's really, really important that we do have a plan of how we're going to promote and encourage tourism. So I'd like to propose that we accept the report.
Thanks for that, Councillor Farr. Councillor Spanzer, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I would like to second that report and welcome the great document we have in front of us to sell the County Borough of Bridgend. And just one tiny part in there, but a massive attraction we have is our natural environment, the free. We don't quite often shout enough how wonderful place we live, our natural environment across the County Borough, but especially the Ogmore Valley and the Llymi Valley and the Garrow Valley. So, but the one part for us this needs to build into later with the new year is our emerging new corporate plan, and to make sure we have appropriate performance indicators in our corporate plan to track this as we go on over the years to make sure we are achieving the goals we set ourselves or the targets we set ourselves.
Thanks, Councillor Spancer. And given the significance of tourism to the economy of Bridgend, that is going to be critical going forward if this plan is, and we're confident this plan can help shape the future of tourism in Bridgend. But to see in black and white that pre-pandemic tourism brought over £1/3 billion of spend into the Bridgend County Borough economy and generated and protected over 4,000 jobs. It's a very clear reminder of the value of tourism to Bridgend, and the value and the impact was growing pre-COVID. Obviously, it was hit quite hard during the years when the pandemic led to lockdowns, but the industry is bouncing back, isn't it? And that's very heartening to see how tourism is going from strength to strength in Bridgend. And on Councillor Spanzer's point, it is of note that the top visitor attractions, the second highest number of visitors to a single attraction in Bridgend is to Bryngarw Country Park in the Garrow Valley, and we should be proud that we secured hundreds of thousands of investment into Bryngarw Park through the Valley's Regional Park initiative, and again numbers are growing year on year at that facility as we continue to make further improvements. And the third highest number of visits to a visitor attraction is to Rest-Bay, another part of the county borough where we secured significant European funding to open the water sports centre, and undoubtedly has had a big impact and helped to increase the numbers. And I know there are exciting plans for Rest-Bay that we are considering. There's exciting plans for the Grand Pavilion, exciting plans for the valleys, and I'm sure Councillor Good is pleased to see the reference to the tricentenary celebrations of Richard Price in the plan, and there's huge potential there to celebrate the very proud heritage that we have in Bridgend. The recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations? And what we'll do is we will look to see how we can ensure that the actions are are monitored at a corporate level, whether that be through the corporate plan, CPA, or the Directorate Business Plan. I'm sure there'll be a way, as far comes to Spansic, that we can track progress in implementing the actions. Thank you very much, Janine. The next report from the Corporate Director for Communities is on another strategy. This is our net zero carbon strategy for Bridgend County Borough Council. Janine, please.
Thank you, Leader. So I'm thrilled to be able to bring this strategy back to you today. It is to seek your approval to formally adopt the Bridgend 2030 net zero carbon strategy and the action plan, which details what we will implement in our borough and to get us to that net zero position by 2030. I mean, what I must make clear, Leader and Cabinet today, is that this is a plan that is for BCBC operations, for the operations that we have ourselves and for our land and our building. It's not for the county as a whole, and it's not for our residents and communities. It is for operations that belong to BCBC. And that is because Welsh Government have tasked the public sector with being net zero carbon by 2030. Now, the background to this is well versed and well documented, Leader. We've had numerous cabinet reports and reports to council on the subject of the climate emergency, and in essence, this is a huge priority for us in our corporate plan. Now, the Welsh Government set that ambitious target for the public sector to be net zero carbon in 4 areas by 2030. The areas are land use, in energy, in transport and procurement. And it was quite a tough ask, really, in order for us to get our plan together. But we worked with experts in this area. We worked with the Carbon Trust, and we did an in-depth review of our data, or we baselined our carbon emissions for our BCBC operations. And what we found out is that we actually, in all our operations, we produce 90,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year, and that is what we do need to reduce. We need to get rid of 90,000 in order to be net zero carbon. And we're actually one of the first LAs, local authorities in Wales, to use the Welsh Government Public Sector Net Zero Carbon Reporting Guide. Not easy to say, but it's something that it's a methodology that Welsh Government have introduced in order to report annually on your carbon baseline and how you are reducing it. So we're thrilled to be able to say that we were one of the first out the gate to do that. So if I go through the current situation with you, the final version of our 2030 strategy is with you today as Appendix 1. And again, just to reiterate, this is all about BCBC operations, not our community. It's what we do, how we operate, how we look after our land and our buildings. Now, a public consultation took place on this strategy over 12 weeks, from the 8th of June to the 30th of August this year, and we had over 360 online surveys completed, which was significant for a survey of this style. We also undertook 35 face-to-face engagements, including with young learners, a very key part of this strategy going forward. And the consultation report that was produced is included as Appendix 2 for you. Now, analysis shows that the majority of the residents are very much in support of this strategy, which is really great to hear. But of course, there were some comments, because this is about the BCBC operations, there were comments about things that are outside of our remit. For instance, low carbon public transport. And the residents are very keen to see things like electric and hydrogen buses, and for other public sector and other organisations to step up to the plate, really, in terms of the net zero position. Now, a couple of other things I would like to point out in the report, Leader. We've identified carbon leads across the local authority to champion this work and to take it forward. And we are committed to reviewing this strategy every 3 years, but to review the action plan annually, because it's a very dynamic document to make sure we've got the latest actions and technology included in our plan. If I take you to Section 8 now, please, which is financial implications. Without doubt, there are resource challenges faced by all public bodies in Wales to achieve this net zero position by 2030. You know, that is significant. The strategy at the moment is being led by the Communities Directorate, by my directorate. However, this is a corporate responsibility, and we will look to incorporate that and embed it into our objectives of our new corporate plan for next year. And much of what we have achieved to date is by way of external funding and grants, although we have matched some of this with BCBC resources. For instance, the Bridgend District Heat Network was funded by HNIP, which is Heat Network Infrastructure Programme for UK Government. We have got our HyBont collaboration about hydrogen with Marubeni and the Japanese government. We've had funding for active travel schemes from Welsh Government in the millions. And we've also undertaken a refit scheme using SAILEX funding, where we've done an investor save in 19 properties in our school estate and are reaping the benefits now. Now, many initiatives in the action plan in future years will be reliant on us achieving external funding, and we'll continue to submit proposals to secure external resources and to fund these 2030 initiatives as we move forward. Just to be clear though, there is no current capital allocation in our capital programme for 2030. So what we will have to do is to review our capital budgets annually as part of balancing our MTFS, look for grants and to achieve this very challenging net zero carbon target. So please, Leader, may I take you to the recommendations in the report at section 9, and that's to formally adopt our 2030 strategy, and as of today, to take forward some of those recommendations to move towards that net zero carbon position. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you to the team that's worked, a small team that's worked so hard on this, because it's going to become one of the most important plans that we have as a County Borough Council to deliver on our response to the climate emergency. Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Janine, and the team that's brought this together. This is the start of a long journey we're on with the carbon, not just 2030, it'll go beyond 2030 and net zero. There's some good stuff, a great document there, but the report itself, it identifies the carbon leads, which I think you may have touched on in 4.5. They're all currently within the Communities Directorate, which is understandable. But I would like to suggest as well a consideration perhaps is given to other directorates to at least have one person, key person that's a carbon lead in it, and each directorate to link with the officers. There's 6 different categories there, and carbon management, waste, transport, buildings, land use and procurement. So it'd be nice to make sure it's not all focused on Communities Directorate officers, because it is a massive task to take forward. And as you've said yourself, this has been the Communities Directorate leading it, but it's a council-wide approach, and delivery going forward must be seen as a corporate responsibility. There's no other way around it. This is Bridgend County Borough Council, and not just one directorate if we're going to make it work. My major concern is the cost, because we're not clear and can't be clear the cost of delivering lots of these projects and the whole project itself, and whether the capital money, the funding will be there in the future to deal with it. But it's something we need to argue and lobby Welsh Government to make sure that the money is there to deal with the future. Because I think 8.6 paragraph says we do not currently have a dedicated capital resource to deliver 2030 programme in its entirety. So that's something we need to give consideration, I think, to make sure we do have a line in the capital programme to deal with net zero 2030, to ensure that we have money identified for this purpose. So I'd like to move the report and thank again for all the work, and let's hope this is the true test of the one council approach. Mark.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. And I'm sure we'll pass that test with flying colours. Councillor Blundell is next, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and I'll happily second the report, and to also say that to build on to what Councillor Spanzik said there about the one council approach, then it should be in every report how anything that we do as a council fits into the 2030 agenda. It should be on, in the same way Future Generations Act is at the end of every report, budget implications. How does this affect the 2030 agenda? How does this affect decarbonisation and so forth? And as Councillor Williams asked in question to the Director and myself about Porthcawl Seedling School, is that going to be net zero? Yes. There shouldn't even be asked. It should be as simple. It is, as it should be with all future projects. So I think that should be a line, at least, so that it's not for us to ask questions. It's there, and we have the answer for members who read it. So that's not a recommendation, but a sort of an advice, Chair, if that's allowed. Thank you.
We'll ask the monitoring officer about that advice, and I certainly welcome the principle of that. I do think, given the importance of achieving this and it being everyone's business, to use a phrase that's often used in a different context, but is true here, it does need to be part of everyone's thinking now in terms of carbon reduction. I think it can be, but we need to ensure at a corporate level that when we're making decisions, whether it's about schools, social services, housing, that we consider the journey we're on to net zero and how we contribute towards that, because each and every service will need to make that contribution to get to where we need to get to in the time that we need to get to that goal. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. The report template is being reviewed because there are a number of other things that we need to make sure are included in there, and I think what we need to do is perhaps streamline some of the headings, so we're looking at them collectively rather than in isolation. So that is work ongoing, and I'll be bringing a report. I think we target in February Council to agree the changes to that.
Welcome that. Thanks for suggesting that. Councillor Brundle, the DEP wants to come in on this point, so I'm sure that Councillor Good and Councillor Williams can wait a moment longer.
Oh, it was just on the point that Kelly raised, actually, about the review of reports. Can I ask then, please, that we have an executive summary in every report that we have, particularly if it's over 10 pages or something, please? Thank you very much.
Yes, that suggestion has been made and it's being factored into the review.
Thank you for that, Kelly. So next we've got Councillor Good, please.
I don't know what the DEP's on about. I really enjoyed my 143-page report yesterday in scrutiny. Some great stuff in there. I just wanted to mention, really sort of building on what Councillor Spanswick has said, because I think it is right. We do need to be looking at having people across each directorate and each team to sort of make sure that we drive this forward, particularly as I can see in the report that sort of 87% of our carbon is from Scope 3 emissions, which is obviously by far the most difficult thing to deal with. I'm actually really surprised that it's that big, that is Scope 3. So I think on top of that, we also excuse me, we also need to be looking at how we drive this understanding through every team. And I think particularly when you're considering schools or other organisations that we don't directly procure for, but we need to make sure that head teachers, etc., when they are procuring, are also thinking about that and making sure that we are, where possible, without spending too much public money unnecessarily, but where possible, ensuring that we are procuring in a way that is as carbon efficient as we can be. Thanks, Leader.
Janine, did you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, absolutely, Councillor Good. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Most LAs in Wales, when we've shared experiences, have the same situation as ourselves. At least 3/4 of the emissions are Scope 3, which is indirect, which isn't something we can impact directly, obviously, it's not in our gift. However, we have to work with organisations and others to ensure that we can have that carbon reduction. And in particular, through conversations with my colleague Lindsay, the Director of Education, we do want to look at schools in particular and see what we can do. I mean, I'm sure there's quite a lot of quick wins there in the school estate. And again, it's working with them. I mean, actually, the young learners and the children, they absolutely love this 2030 agenda. In fact, they know far more than some of the adults in the room as well. You won't be surprised to hear. So we've got some willing participants there to drive this agenda forward for sure. So yes, let's. I think looking at the school estate in particular, I would welcome that. Thank you.
And that's music to my ears. You know how keen I am that we explore the opportunities around, in particular, the school estate, but all our estate, and where there's a case, and I'm sure there is a case, a compelling case to invest to save. So we know that we can make some upfront capital investment, but that will deliver long-term revenue savings that will pay back the investment we have to make up front, but it will also help accelerate the reductions in carbon use that we need to achieve to meet our ambitious targets around net zero. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's all probably been said now, isn't it? But, no, I just want to agree with everyone and say that it is about a mind shift. It's a step process, getting to 2030, but then 2030 becomes 2031, and the real works needs to begin then to maintain that zero in a growing economy. And it's great that the young children in school are taking a keen interest, because they will be the ones that'll pick this baton up one day and have to carry it forward. Just on the financial sort of implications of it, I've just very quickly sort of scanned through the announcement from the West Local Government Finance settlement today, and it does appear that a sizable proportion of the capital spending is actually allocated towards the 2030 agenda. So hopefully that there will be an avenue there that we can tap into.
That is brilliant news. I'm sure we'll be well placed to take advantage of any financial opportunities that are made available by Welsh Government. And building on your point, Councillor Williams, and a point that was made by Councillor Spanzik earlier, we should see this as a potential to grow our economy. Thinking about our natural environment, the 250,000 people every year that visit Bringarrow Park and our other natural assets, we should see this as an opportunity that we should seize to create jobs, and actually not just jobs in tourism and destination, but also the jobs that can be created by switching to low energy, for example, the adaptations to our buildings, and also then the other industries that potentially will develop here in Bridgend that we're pioneering and leading in the renewable sector. Janine, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, actually, you're spot on there, because a lot of the work in the future in the industry and the training for these young learners coming through will be on new technology. You know, if we are going to be phasing out gas boilers, we're going to be bringing ground source heat pumps and air heat pumps, district heat networks, and we do need, those new engineers of this sustainable technology for the future. So there's an enormous wealth of intelligence required in that green economy. So not only does it bring the benefits of decarbonisation, it brings significant employment benefits for us as well, and education opportunities as well. And we're starting to see that already come through with heat network academies for people to start to understand the new technology. Thank you, Leader.
Very exciting opportunities, and I know Bridgend College is already capitalising on those opportunities, and I think can become a centre of excellence for training and teaching that next generation of workers in the cutting edge of the green economy. Recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Thank you, colleagues. That was the last public report on today's agenda. I have not had any urgent items to consider in accordance with the Council's constitution, and therefore we will move on to agenda item 40, which is a proposal to exclude the public, and we will of course have to apply the public interest test before we exclude any members of the public, and I will ask the monitoring officer to take us through that test, please.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet will be aware that there is a presumption that all business is done open and transparently. However, there are exemptions in the legislation, and I can confirm that I've reviewed the reports and they both contain information which would be exempt under the relevant legislation, in that the information is commercially sensitive and it relates to the business and financial affairs of the Council and other organisations. It's therefore a matter for Cabinet to apply the public interest test and to determine whether to hear this in closed session. It should be noted that when appropriate, this information will be released into the public domain. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Kelly. It's clear that there's some very commercially sensitive information within both reports. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm quite happy that we move that this is in closed session, essentially. We do meet the public interest test. Thank you.
I'll second that, Leader.
I'll turn my microphone on. Is it cleared, B? We have to check about the people are hiding.